Right in the middle of the...
Hello, everybody. Everybody. Can't hear you.
How am I going to do that?
Okay, guys, we gotta get
Okay.
accepted.
I like
Okay, everybody. Can I have everybody's attention? Can you hear me? Can everybody hear me? You sure you hear me? So everybody sit down and take a little break. All right, we're going to talk a little bit about my dad tonight. My dad, happy birthday, Dad.
You're supposed to say thanks for the clap.
It's not my birthday, it's his.
It looks like my dad is turning 80 years. Yes. Can you guys believe that? 80 years old.
He don't look a day over 79.
Oh, yeah. Guys, that's a lot of meatball.
80 years, yeah.
Let me just cut right to the chase here. You know, my dad, we all know my dad loves food, right? Come on, can I hear clapping?
Yeah.
My dad loves food, and the thing is that he cares about quantity, of course, but he also cares about quality, you know? Like, for instance, my dad always told me that I should eat from the 5 food groups. Pizza, Nathan's hot dogs, meatballs, mozzarella,
Yeah.
and salt.
Plenty of salt.
Yeah, I like that.
That sounds just like it.
Seeing my dad with a salt shaker is like seeing a heroin addict going through withdrawal. Oh man, you're gonna get it later, Bob. I got you in this, okay? All right, so.
You stink.
You know, my dad though, he does care about quantity too. You know, now some people, they tend to, you know, like to buy in bulk, right? Because they identify as a spendthrift. My dad likes to eat in bulk because he identifies as a fat guy. So I remember the first time I realized that my dad really loved food. Okay, I went to the movie theater with him, and he wanted to buy something at the concession stand. So he heads up to the concession stand, and he says to the lady there, "Bring me the family-style popcorn." So the woman turns around and she gets the largest tub of popcorn I've ever seen in my life, right? She brings it over, she smiles at me and she says, "You and your brothers and sisters are gonna love this." I'm like, "Yeah." I look over at my dad, and I want to reach for some popcorn, and he's like, "So what do you want?" Oh man, but I didn't just learn about love of food from my dad. I learned a lot of things. Another memory I have is some advice he gave me once. I was on the subway with him. We were going into Manhattan for some outing. And it was the subway, you know, and everybody was kind of in a bad mood, and they had scowls on their face, and they were rubbed up against each other. So all of a sudden, my dad looks down at me with this very serious face, and he says, "Robin, whatever you do, get out of the city." So I don't know why this always resonated with me. I remembered that. So when I turned 18, that was it. I was gone. I moved to New England, never to come back. Well, recently I brought it up with my dad again. I said, "Dad, remember that time you gave me that advice to leave the city?" He looked a little confused, and he looked at me and he's like, "Oh yeah, Robin, I remember that, but I meant go to Brooklyn." You gotta watch what you say to kids, because they don't always get it right. You know, I mean, I think my sister was in the subway that day, and he said the same thing to her, and she went to Jersey. Oh man. So anyway, what else did I want to say? So she went to Jersey, and then let's see. Oh, I also grew up in a house that was very liberal, right? I learned about liberalism from my dad, because he always wanted to fight for the underdog. Isn't that true? Guys, you know that about him? Yeah, and one of his favorite expressions was, "Stick it to the man," right? Stick it to the man. I grew up hearing that. Well, now he still believes in stick it to the man, but he's talking about a very particular man. Trump guy. But I gotta say something.
I gotta leave.
I want something, Jimmy, because my dad, he hates Trump, it's true, but he's not like a solid Trump hater, and the reason is because he's open-minded. He's always willing to listen to somebody else's point of view, right? And talk about it. And talk about it.
And talk about it.
Oh my God, and you know, he's always willing to argue any point of view as well, as long as it's the opposite of your point of view. So another one of my dad's favorite things, of course, is
Getting roasted by you.
movies. My dad loves movies, right? He's a great movie lover. Everybody knows it. I get all of my appreciation and knowledge of movies from my dad. In fact, I have another early memory of my dad. He was one of the first people to take me out to the movies. We went to the movies. It was such an experience. I remember what it was to this day. The Exorcist. I was 6 years old.
6 years old.
The panic attacks.
Bob was with us.
The panic attacks are getting better now. It is getting better. I will say that. You know, and my dad is a very selfless movie watcher. Because in fact, my dad will watch upwards of 20 to 30 movies just to have one pick that he could recommend to friends and family. Now that's sacrifice, isn't it?
That's a lot of hours.
Yeah, and that he gives up for us. Speaking of sacrifice, my dad, now we know he's not a religious man, but he does have a Bible.
I do.
The New York Times. Every day my dad goes out and gets the New York Times and he spreads the sacred text out on the kitchen table, just so, and he reads all the headlines aloud to Grzina, turning each page, reading aloud, and then after he's perused for a while, he is ready to give his sermon on his interpretation of that day's sacred text to anybody who will listen. But you know what, I think that Dad's sacred text has worked well for him, you know, because he's had a very interesting and successful life, right? He brought my sister and I into the world. Then he toiled for his union and worked for the underdog through social work. He bought and he managed and he sold properties. And you know, he's traded more successfully on the stock market than any other self-professed communist I know.
Ain't that the truth? Ain't that the truth? You phony bastard. You phony bastard. You and Trump.
My dad has aided and abetted scores of potentially deportable Polish immigrants. But even with all these accomplishments in his long, varied life, he still has not achieved his most sought-after life's goal. To conquer Bob in Scrabble.
It never happened.
It's not going to happen. No, but he keeps trying, right? He keeps trying.
Hey, wait till you play a person called Fred Robin.
So in any case, of course, I haven't mentioned the greatest joy of my dad's life, which is wonderful marriage to Grzina. He met her over 20 years ago sitting on a park bench in Brooklyn. What could go wrong with a man like that?
Were you feeding the pigeons?
He did have to give up the 5 food groups and trade them in for kielbasa. You know, but
I don't like that trade.
but it was worth it because Grzina has the skill that is needed, the best skill to deal with my dad, which is that she can listen to his daily sermons while tuning out what he says completely, nodding and grunting in all the right spots, while simultaneously cooking, cleaning, and talking in Polish to one of her kids. So, Dad,
That's one of the things you don't know what the hell you're saying.
I don't have to worry.
so Dad, you've had a very unique life. You're a unique soul. I love you. Happy birthday and many more.
That was
Let me get up.
that was terrific, honey. That was terrific.
No, yes, no, babcia's gonna talk and then mama's gonna talk.
That's your new act.
I've been working on it. That's why I haven't been up in the clubs.
I've been working on it.
You got a very talented family, Fred. You got a drummer, you got a comedian, you got a comedian.
Yes, come on.
Boom, boom, boom.
Come on.
Baby, am I in your way? Hold on, because the babcia's gonna talk.
Are you
You
filming
got a
too?
talented family. Drummer, comedian.